Mind the screen problem.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry for the late start. That was technical malfunction on my part, trying to get the camera to actually show me, but we're here now. So this is a theatrical morning, and it started out just like that, very theatrically. So theatrical is a cliff tea from the Wuyi Mountains. We've been in this series of cliff teas. We started with Quasar last week. We did Golden Diviner. Midweek, we put on a recording, a makeup recording from the May 11th session for Ecstatic Spring. And we're finishing up this series with Theatrical. I can hardly think of a better cliff tea to end the series with. And you'll see why when we go through. So many times there's discussion of naming conventions. So there's the discussion of the Sophie's naming conventions, discussion of the naming conventions in China, the confusion about how many varietals are in the Wuyi Mountains. You get some numbers from 1,000 years ago that there were 800 varietals. You have some surveys from the late Qing, that Qing dynasty is what I'm talking about, is that there were over 800 varietals. You get research that occurred during the 1930s and 1940s, which says, no, there's 230. Then you get further analysis by some famous scientists, particularly in the 1940s, who say, well, it really looks like there's about 130 varietals. And then as they do further scientific testing, they come to another number. Number is 80 different varietals. You see a theme here, fewer and fewer varietals. But why? Why in the world is this an issue? It should be pretty easy. This is a tea plant. It looks this way. It's got to be a separate varietal. So let's talk about this briefly. First off, the tea plants in the Wuyi Mountains, by and large, are small-leafed, occasionally aiming a little bit towards middle-sized leaf plants. In general, because of the way plants are harvested now, and because of the way they're grown, they don't live as long as they used to. So tea plants slash small trees that lived for 600, 700, 800, even 1,000 years, those, as soon as they became monoclonal plantings, didn't have as much power in the plant or as much energy in the plant. And typically, they live to be about 50, 60 years old. Versus in the original plants, where they were propagated by seed, those plants live hundreds of years. So there's a difference from that perspective. There's other differences because of how the plant is treated. Let's think about these plants for a minute. They're grown in the fields. That's in recent history, the last 200 or 300 years. Grown in the fields, you're pruning, you're picking, you're doing all those things. Plant doesn't have much of a chance to rest. Plant doesn't have much of a chance to aggregate its energy. Therefore, there's some things that seem to be missing. So how many of you have actually seen flowers from tea plants? The answer is probably almost none of you, because in the fields, whether it's India, China, Brazil, Sri Lanka, they don't go to flower. They continue pruning throughout the year. They're shaping the plant. They're getting it ready essentially for harvest. Whether you harvest once a year or twice a year or 3 times a year, every movement that the farmer has is getting it ready for harvest. The Wuyi Mountains for the cliff teas. Theatrical is only harvested once a year. Golden Diviner, only once a year. Quasar, only once a year. But if you go to Anxi, which is southern Fujian province, Iron Goddess Light, how many times a year is that being harvested? If it's in a famous place, say it's in Xiping, which is a famous place for Iron Goddess Light, it's being harvested twice a year. Why? First time is spring. Energy, beauty. Let's get those plants picked. Let's get them processed. Let's get them out to the tea drinking public. Oh, and by the way, since this is a humid area, if possible, let's get this done as early as possible, because you know what? The bugs like these plants too, but if we can get to them before the bugs do, it's easier. We don't have to use so much pesticide. Now, you heard what I just said, didn't you? We don't have to use so much pesticide. So that implies there's pesticide use, which there is in southern Fujian. There tends to be. Let me put it that way. It's not 100% of every farmer, but there's quite a lot of pesticide use. How about, as in that area, where they pick twice a year, they pick in the fall. It is unbearable in the fall. Why is it unbearable? There are bugs everywhere. It's hot. It's humid. However, in order to bring in money, and because of the cultural terroir of this area, and what I mean by that is annually, 2 picks. The pick in the fall is considered a very favorable pick in terms of aroma. The pick in the spring is considered a very favorable pick in terms of flavor. So you have that terroir which guides the farmers. Now, what's the difference with the Wuyi Mountains? Why is it that they're only picking once? Is that not their cultural terroir? I mean, perhaps they have a different cultural terroir, or perhaps it's a World Heritage Site. Oh, yeah, that's right. It is a World Heritage Site. So, when things are a World Heritage Site, what do the evaluators like to see? They like to see sustainability. They like to see no pesticides. They like to see no herbicides. How about the local government in agreement with the farmers? What do they like to see? They like to see big profits. They like to see wonderful tasting crafted tea. That's what they like to see. And they also like to be in accordance, because they found that being a World Heritage Site has brought so many benefits with the rules and regulations. So they've all agreed in the Wuyi Mountains. We're going to pick once. We'll prune during the year to make sure that the plant is growing favorably if it needs pruning. But we're not going to dump stuff. So that's one thing. We started this discussion on names. I still haven't gotten around to the names. You know why? Because I haven't gotten around to what varietals have gotten into the Wuyi Mountains. You've had alien varietals. Varietals that are not homegrown, that have snuck in. In fact, one of them is extremely famous currently. We call it water sprites here. Green rope narcissus in this shop. And that's a small tree that grows in the Wuyi Mountains. Did it originate there? No, it did not originate there. It originated in southern Fujian province. Somebody came, planted it. It grew very well, adapted itself to the physical terroir, and produces a wonderful tea up there. So you do have some alien varieties. And that includes both for the Wulong teas and the red teas that come. Radiance, which is a red tea. Early Spring, which is a red tea. These are all aliens. They did not originate within the Wuyi Mountains. They originate from other parts of Fujian province, but they love the environment there and they produce a great product. Okay, so we have names associated with those. Hey, somebody told me, or I read somewhere, I can't remember which, that some of these tea varietals have numbers for names. Well, that's rather inconvenient, right? For the Western consuming. I want 102. Wait a minute. Is it I want 102 or I want 202? I can't remember. Is it 304? Where did these names come from? These names came from the research institutes. Why? Two things have happened with teas in the Wuyi Mountains. Actually, teas all over China have specimen names. And it's by specimen, I didn't use the right word. Let's call it varietal/species names. That's better. Most of the time, you're completely unaware of these names. Almost everybody except scientists in the field are completely unaware of these names. Scientists in the field use these names to talk to each other. Yeah, I've gotten, I think there's 6 numbers or 8 numbers. I'm using whatever the 8 number thing is. Oh yeah, I know what that is. I know exactly what that is. So that's why you have names. But then within the Wuyi Mountains, because the Fujian Research Institute has over the years introduced some new varietals. They usually introduce them using numbers, and it's 3-digit number. That's never caught on in the Western market, thank goodness, because it's incongruous when you think of Scarlet Robe, Iron Warrior, Golden Diviner, and 302. What? Wait, say that last one again. Oh yeah, 302. Wait, was that 304? Incongruous. So we don't use numbers here. And actually in China, most of the time when those teas, by the time they get to market, they have a name. And that name reflects something about the characteristic of the hybridization or the flavor or the look or the age. There's all sorts of things. And by the way, that's cultural terroir because most of the names within the Wuyi Mountains reflect those things. What's it smell like? What's it look like? What flower is associated with it? When was it planted? You have names that point back to all these things. Some of the names point back to legends about the plants, or legend that was Scarlet Robe is legend, right? They point back to some sort of history related to the plants. So this is where the names come from. In Sophie's, of course, the names do come from some of that. But many of those names come from the tea master and understudy's heads. And not inconsistent with the naming values in the Wuyi Mountains, point at some characteristic of the tea. So these things are important to understand because in the market, you get a number of names, and if you don't understand where those come from, you don't know what to ask. So I think I mentioned this last week or the week before, that Scarlet Robe has come to symbolize for many people just the general category of cliff tea. what those who are really researching deep into cliff teas, how they usually refer to Scarlet Road is either a blend, hint, hint, that means it's varietals that are mixed together, or they're referring to something called number one field of Polestar, beta. And what that refers to is that's the first cuttings from those original 6 bushes. So again, there's history, there's rhyme and reason associated with the names. For somebody coming in, I had a customer last Sunday who said, hey, explain to me again what it is you do with these teas, because they've heard us talk about the various things we do with teas. I said the usual, we curate these teas. We have fun. We curate. It's about the teas. It's not about us. So the customer thinks for about a nanosecond and says, you know what? Most of the time when I see a curated selection of anything, that means 20 or 30 items very well explained. Not boards and boards of items. So just as a reminder to everybody, these are well explained, and we use these tea tastings to explain each of these varietals very well. We understand these varietals at that level. And thus, yes, our collection is a large collection. Our collection is not a market collection. So let's be clear about this, because most of the places you will walk in, whether it's in the US or in China or in India, anywhere where they're talking about the Wuyi cliff teas, they will not have what you get here. Generally speaking, almost 100% in the US they won't have. In China, not so many places will have. You have to know exactly what you're looking for and be able to address that right away. If you're not able to address that, people won't bring it out. So we had another person come in today, not today, this week, and he'd had an experience in Taiwan. And it was an interesting experience because he went in with 9 or 10 foreigners. He's Asian, went in the shop, and everybody's talking about tea and they're being served. And he said, where's the tea that you keep in the back? And so the people, oh no, this is everything out here. This guy's patient because he's a student here at Sophie's. So he knew that wasn't true. He's patient. And all the people who were hanging out with him, except one other person, oh, we'll move along to the next stop. And then this guy started asking more technical questions about the tea. And finally, the old guy at the back of the shop signaled the forward salespeople, disappear. I'll take care of this. And he spoke and quickly ascertained that this young man knew quite a bit about tea. So he brought the stuff out from the back, the real stuff. The real stuff. Now, that sounds ridiculous, and it is ridiculous. Let me rephrase that. The tea that is harder to come by, the rare teas, that's what he brought out. And our customer knew to get this and knew to ask for this. Most people in Taiwan don't know to ask for this. So whether they're Chinese or not, but if they do know to ask for it, then they get access to it. So you have that situation. We had another interesting situation where 2 of our customers went to the World Tea Association meeting in Las Vegas 3 or 4 weeks ago. And they were able to detect mistakes in presentation. Why were they able to detect mistakes in presentation. Mistakes in presentation and explanation. Why were they able to detect that? Because they are the 99.9 percenters or the 1%ers. In other words, top tier. And all of you are who participate in these tea tastings. You know, and are able to feel a glass. God, this is 200 degrees. And what tea did they claim that they had in this? Oh, well, let's pretend that they didn't brew it right. Let's look at the leaves. Oh my gosh, these leaves don't look like raw black leaves. These look like something else. You all know through experience what these leaves should look like. And you're qualified to ask questions about leaves and temperature, when especially when presented the wrong way. And it was really, I was really proud of both of the people who went to the Tea Association and were able to actually identify mistakes that have been made. And when they asked the presenter, who was some famous person, thank goodness I'm not famous in just another study, so I can afford to make mistakes and nobody will pay attention. They tried to brush it off and said, oh no, I'm sure this has got to be right. It's got to be right. I'll tell you, things don't have to be anything. You analyze, you make a judgment, it's right or wrong based on the judgment, and you have reasons. And in here you have reasons. All right, I've chatted opening round too long. I started too late, but you're all extremely lucky because from all these excesses, now you get the real centered and balanced and numinous tea master, Bijou, to come up and put the energy into theatrical and make this a brilliant tea. So it is my great pleasure to bring forth Bijou.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I have English name. Some people, the type use the Bijou, Bijou, yeah. So funny. So we do, the Oolong tea, huh? But today I weren't green, just green. I really don't know. So, okay.
Everybody's green.
Yeah.
Kay is green.
Kay is green.
Hey, our honored guest is green too. We have an honored guest within the shop. It's all a green light day.
Yes. This is the special tea, huh? Special tea. I'm really focused on the. This is Wulong, yeah.
So that's 6 grams. It's already pre-measured and it's in, oh, you're supposed to be watching this demonstration. So she's demonstrating, but when you get to your bag, it's 6 grams. It's already pre-measured. She's drying 200-degree water. She has a clay pot. You can use clay or ceramic. If you have the special clay pot, this would be a great tea to get that out for. And instead of 3 minutes for the special clay pot, I'm sorry, for the regular I Ching pot, you would do 2 minutes. You notice that she applies hot water both inside and outside. You want this pot as hot as possible. Wulong tea loves heat. I don't mean 212. Don't change the temperature. So as hot as possible within the framework of 200 degrees. All right, she's gotten it all heated up. carefully puts the tea leaves in, shakes up the pot, and this isn't a random shake. This isn't a child shaking a teapot. This is a focus shake because she's trying to get the tea leaves woken up, trying to get them to touch heat. You set your timers if you're, well, you don't set your timers yet. When you set your timers, it will be for 3 minutes.
We have a question about what would the timing be for the special clay pots?
Special clay pot would be 2 minutes. You apply the, you pour in the hot water, the 200-degree water, and then set your timer and press it for 3 minutes. Now, Theatrical is one of those teas that the Fujian Research Institute hybridized. They hybridized that sometime in the 1990s. And remembering that this process takes 20, 21, 22, up to 25 years. Why? Because they don't want to put a tea too quickly onto market. Because if you put a tea quickly on the market, who might be the most damaged by mistakes? By mistake. And that would be the farmer. So if the first year the yield is great, everybody's happy, farmer is happy, and the second year the yield is half of that. And by the way, the farmer's taken out half of whatever else they had to plant that. All of a sudden you create problems for the farming community. So they go through lots and lots of testing before they actually release it widespread. They actually have fields at this research institute. It's a mountainside worth of fields. They also have relationships with farmers in the Wuyi Mountain area. So they'll experiment with small plots. And once everything seems to be really good, then they release to the general farming public. And so that's what this particular tea is. It was released in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and this has now become a big hit. And obviously, well, it's not obvious. Let me make it obvious. These are hybridized varietals of other bushes within the Wuyi Mountains. So they're not just going off, they don't go to Mongolia and get some bushes and then, oh, let's try this. This sounds like it would be really interesting. No, they stay within the local terroir. Occasionally they'll go to southern Fujian and use those, but by and large, it's mostly in the Wuyi Mountain terroir. Why do they do this? Some of the varietals are really small crop varietals within the Wuyi Mountains, and they know they're really good, but they think they can make them even better and have a wider distribution. All right, 3 minutes is expired. Tea master is separating the tea from the leaves. Notice not in a hurry, just rhythmically. And what a beautiful result. Just an absolutely lovely result in terms of color. Let's see about the rest of this result. Oh my gosh, I don't even have to put my nose close. There's that result. There's an aroma. Let's enter the quality arena, remembering that this is a 200-degree steeping, we have to use a cautious inhalation. So I will do that. And I'll cover my tongue with just that inhalation, roll it around in my mouth. Okay. I see where it's drying. I also have a sense of astringency and where. I definitely have some aftertaste. I'm working on the energetics. Let me do this again. And as I do it again the second time around, I'm also focusing on aroma, that's of the tea itself, as well as flavor. So I'm doing all of these things at the same time. Inhalation. Okay, what else am I doing? I'm thinking about last week, Golden Diviner. I'm thinking about the week before, Quasar. And I'm thinking about the session that we snuck onto YouTube in the middle of this week for Ecstatic Spring. I'm thinking of all three of those as I go through this because I'm making a comparison. The fun of what we have. One of the fun things about what we have in this collection is you get to compare all of these teas. This is rare that you can compare teas at this level, especially cliff teas. So your opportunity to do this is rare in the world. So that's what we're doing today. We're entering the quality arena. We're making judgments. Is there an absolute right and an absolute wrong? I am really happy to report to you that there is not. That there are ranges of feelings and ranges of reaction, and all of those are fine. Because as it turns out, we are all happily genomically different. Part of what makes this such a great human experience. All right, it's your turn to brew. The tea master will brew with you. Set your timers for 3 minutes. Get your water ready in 200-degree water. You notice she's making sure that the pot doesn't have any leaves left over from the first steeping, because it will influence the flavor. Will that be a positive influence? Or will it be a negative influence? And the answer is neither. It will be a false influence. And what do I mean by that? It won't tell you all you can learn by making it a pure first steeping and a pure second steeping and or a pure
So
third steeping.
if it was the same type of tea, it would still alter the outcome?
Yes, great question. So if it were the same type of tea, and especially if it's the same type of tea, it's not going to give you a pure read if you have leaves left over. Here, and this is really easy to understand. And I'll explain why it's easy to understand. When you have leaves left over, did you measure those? Oh, yes, I left 2 grams worth of leaves. And the answer is no, you didn't. You don't know what you left in there. Therefore, it's an imprecision. You introduce imprecision into the process. Our tea rhythm hates imprecision. We don't do imprecision. Well, I do. But every time I'm caught at it, I'm in trouble. So therefore, we don't really like to have imprecision within the process. And that's why it makes a difference, because you can't get a great read. And when we have classes in here, we go through the same process because it's important for people to know an ideal first steeping, an ideal second steeping, and what can be done. All right,
Here's a question. If one has an 8-ounce versus a 12-ounce pot, should they still use 6 ounces of tea or less?
Well, they should under no circumstance use 6 ounces of tea. They might want to
Mm.
use 6 grams of tea, but an 8-ounce pot, you really, it's not mathematical, and that's what's so confusing. As soon as you use different sizes of pots, as soon as we use different sizes of pots, we have to go through the whole process again and figure out, okay, it's not going to be 8, should it be 5, should it be 4? We don't know until we go through that process. So the answer is, the real answer is, we don't know. If we were going to take a guess, the guess would be use 5 grams.
And Jim corrected himself, but I often say ounces when I mean grams.
A lot of people do, because we're not used to, except in the tea house, the gram and ounce methodology. Because when we cook, we don't use grams. We use teaspoons, we use tablespoons. Yeah, we do use ounces a little bit, but it's just really confusing. But here, and related to the question of leaving leaves in a pot, we actually do use very precise. And the reason is since we're not a tea culture, we're trying to get everybody to be precise about that, to learn the best way to enjoy the tea culture. Oh, did you are? Oh, my goodness. Tea Master is way ahead of me. She already poured the water in. Set the time, and I'm supposed to be talking now too. Here I am off to the side. All right, so you've already presumably started your tea and it's brewing. And I was talking just a minute ago about this being one of those hybridized teas. You're gonna, as soon as this is done, go through the normal processes, making some judgments about this, normal process of referring back to your notes. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the process of making the tea, because we haven't really talked about making. We de-emphasized making during this unit. And we've done that on purpose, because you've heard me talk about that about 10,000 times. But there are 1 or 2 more points I want to make. We're not going to go through the whole process, but we're going to go through 1 or 2 more points. And that'll help you understand why precision is important. Because even as they process, it seems on the surface imprecise. It is not imprecise.
We're getting some warm leaf comments.
Oh, great.
Smell is wonderful, almost getting a dark cherry aroma. Another like roasted chocolate. And aroma is sweet and floral with some mild roast forest.
Roast forest, chocolate, sweet, and cherry were leaf comments. And that's the aroma of the leaves. Great commentary, and it shows you that we're in the right province. We're in Fujian province, where you have this combination with the cliff teas. Those are all great comments. I detect everything you have detected in there. And it's interesting, whoever said the forest comment, that's the one in some ways I like the most, because that's the most subtle feeling. And yet, if you ask me, for me, that was kind of a leading feeling for this tea. And then, yes, all the rest of the chocolate, the cherry, and the chocolate, and sweet, all of those are occurring in this tea. And it proves to you, in addition to one other element, that this is truly a cliff tea. You can never make a mistake whether something is a cliff tea or it isn't a cliff tea, because the terroir, especially the cliff teas here. Okay, so now I have to put a footnote. if you go outside of the mountain, there is no telling what a cliff tea will actually taste like. The only exception to that is, by and large, once you're outside of the mountain, and remember, this is as opposed to being inside the mountain, half inside the mountain, still beside or kind of in the mountain. You're within the river that surrounds the mountain, and then there's outside the mountain. Outside of the mountain, it's almost always going to be heavily roasted without very distinct flavors, because this is how you hide that you're outside the mountain. Just roast the hell out. Oops, roast the heck out. Yes.
It's got a comment about, the first sip gives us a juicy mouthfeel, mineral forward, nice roast, and something at the end that's hard to put our finger on.
Love the middle of this comment. Mineral forward. This is clearly mineral forward. And that's what I was talking about. That's why you will never miss this has to be a cliff tea because it's mineral forward. Let's go back to this comment again. I got lost. I fell into the mineral forward. Whatever.
Juicy mouthfeel,
That's right.
nice roast, and something at the end that is a little bit hard to put your finger on.
Perfect. So still trying to figure out at the end all the other things that are in it. Opening part of this comment was great as well. Juicy mouthfeel. There is no question that this is so drinkable that if it weren't 200 degrees, you would probably just drink this down fast because it's got that juicy mouthfeel.
The tea liquor has a honey caramel scent. It is round, and I would know blindfolded that this was a cliff tea.
Ah, perfect comment. Blindfolded. This person would know that this is a cliff tea. Round flavor, not round flavor, round taste. Also, I think that implies a little bit round flavor, but certainly I think that it's round taste that's what's being referred to here. And sweet with hint of caramel. And perfect. All of these elements point unmistakably to cliff tea. Yes.
Next comment is about one of the photos. The special pot I bought is very similar to the one in the email. Is by the same artist? Is there some connection to this tea?
That's a great question. So is there a connection of the special pots to this tea? And the answer actually is yes. The artists who do these throughout China are really only thinking of Wuyi teas, and they're only thinking of the Wuyi teas. Typically, they're only thinking of the Wuyi teas from the Wuyi Mountains. Now, is that exclusively 100% the case? No, because some of them might be thinking of southern Fujian province Wulong teas as well. But the real artistry, the legends, the poetry, most of that emanates around northern Fujian cliff teas. It doesn't mean that there isn't some sort of cultural milieu in the South. It just means it's not as rich as the cultural milieu in the North. And think of this, if you're an artist doing a pot and you're thinking about a lot of things, okay, what shape? Okay, what plants am I going to include? If I'm going to include plants, what symbols, not plants, what symbols am I going to include? And oh, by the way, if I'm going to write a piece of calligraphy, is there some famous calligraphy from the past that will summarize the great feelings that come with using this pot? These are all the elements that artists are thinking of. And they're not thinking to themselves, well, okay, let's see, I'm going to make a pot with this clay Yeah, technically, nobody's gonna use this for green tea, but I love poetry about green tea from the elements. Am I gonna use that as an artist on the spot? And the answer is, you're not an artist of this craft if you do that. So the answer would be absolutely not. It's the romanticism that comes from this area. Think about this for a minute. Let's get in our history. This is a long time period of famous tea. Taoists, Buddhists, Confucianists, all together. Beauty, legend, stories. How can you go wrong as an artist? This is a very inspiring place. Okay, I've talked too long. That was a long answer to a short question. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Are there any scientific health studies of health benefits of cliff tea versus, say, white tea?
So the question is, compared to other teas, do the cliff teas stand out as having some special health benefits? And the answer to that is they do. And yet we have to be careful as we think about this, because I was actually just looking at a study this morning, which was asking the question, you have rare earth minerals in the Wuyi Mountains. How does that affect the tea? Well, there was really good news in that answer, is that they're not in such concentration that they would poison you. So that's really good news. And that's even if you're brewing it for a long time. Really, really good news. You have all these health claims related to speeding up the metabolism, increasing your cardiovascular health, helping you if you're hungover. I mean, there's this whole raft of claims. You notice I don't usually speak about any of these things because these claims for the cliff tea are especially hard for me to speak about, because compared to green tea, where they've isolated catechins, they've done test tube studies. Oh yeah, this wipes out tumor cells in a test tube. We don't know what it does in the body, but at least we know it's good in the test tube. Doctors know that, yeah, this is good for cardiovascular health for the following reasons. I mean, we've got tons of information on green tea. We've got tons of information on white tea. Oh yeah, it's great for skin health. We have all these tests and so forth. The cliff teas have been studied, but people are studying them from so many different angles that we don't have thin slices. Science is driven by thin slices. And we don't have one slice which says, yes, I studied this on 100,000 people, and on average, it increased their life by 8 years, or on average, their hair grew better. We don't have those type of studies. Instead, they're broad spectrum studies, and they're saying all these things about alleged health benefits, but I am loath to really repeat those to you because I'm a Westerner. And I like the narrow spectrum studies because then I feel much more comfortable. Oh, yes, under this condition, this has occurred, and other scientists have been able to replicate that. So that's why, though there are broad spectrum and plenty of studies which seem to indicate great diverse health benefits, not enough for me to be comfortable and report back to you, oh, for sure, this does this, that, and that. Yes.
We have some good energetics comments. One, energy feels warm and calm and warming. A second, getting a nice, warm and grounding body feel with mental clarity.
Calm and warming as energetics. A calming feeling as part of that energetics. A grounding feeling as part of the energetics. Yeah, I definitely get that warm feeling. I'm warm all over when drinking this. And many times I'll start my day off if I'm scattered for some reason coming to the shop and I need to accomplish things. I just need to get myself in a more steady frame of mind. I'll start with a Cliff tea because without question, Cliff teas for me get me much more focused.
Rob says, as I look down into the depths of the cup, I'm imagining an ancient insect trapped in amber.
This great comment. Rob's commentary is looking down in the cup. He can imagine an ancient insect trapped in the amber. In other words, I think if I'm interpreting this correctly, this is this feeling of some sort of ancientness related. It's a path of ancientness. This tea comes from a long time ago, is I think the feeling that he's capturing with this. And I really get that because when I'm drinking this, this feels to me, and that's part of the grounding effect, like it's a tea from time immemorial.
Jim says, I tried a third brewing, but it was yellowish color, much less aroma and flavor. So I take it we should stop at 2 brews.
Yes, so Jim tried a third brewing. We never recommend third brewings. The reason we don't is exactly how Jim reported. It comes in light, color isn't as attractive, but most importantly, it doesn't have that same sense of grounding. It doesn't have that same sense of substance. And while we like to stretch our teas, and all of us do it from time to time under certain conditions, these teas are unstretchable, really. First 2 brews, you get a lot out of them. Anything beyond that, it just feels thin and insubstantial. And we don't accept that for our Cliff teas.
One thing I was going to add was from the moment you poured it to my first scent and just kind of diving into the 200 degrees, the one word that I keep coming back to is classic.
Oh, let me go back to Rob's comment about amber in the tea and an insect in the tea. Kay just now used the word classic, and I think the 2 comments are linked because this does have a classic feel to it. You think about for those of you who had a bouillante, there was nothing classic about that. That thing was just all over you, really energetic, but it wasn't classic. This thing, it's like an old friend. And I love this comment because it does feel like an old friend. It's comfortable. There's tradition here. You can feel it as you're going through this cup. Great, great commentary.
I think if I were going to, I had a friend over who was ready to taste a Cliff tea. I'd feel very comfortable sharing this one. And it would say a lot if they liked it or didn't like it.
Great comment. So Kay followed up. If a friend were coming over who had never had Cliff tea before, but was wanting to try a Cliff tea, this would be a leader for her because this would tell her right away, and it would tell the person who was receiving it, oh yeah, this is interesting. Okay, let's continue the path. Or, my God, I don't understand this at all. This is not tea. Then you know you don't continue down that path. And this one is so easy. And easy is a relative term, isn't it? So relatively easy for a first timer. If they're going to have interest, this is a very, very wonderful one to start out with. This is much easier to start out with than Golden Divine. Golden Diviner is a great cliff tea, but it's different from this. You don't think of it as classic, even though it's classic in a certain sense. It's not classic like this. And you don't look in the tea immediately and come up with tradition. Whereas all of you have captured tradition, grounding, warming, classic, all the things that make a cliff tea great. And you're pointing at something that I already talked to. I love the fact that you're pointing at this, even though it's unconscious. I pointed to the fact that this was hybridized. And it took 25 years to do this. They don't just look at the physical tea leaf output, ability to resist insects. They look at, hey, what's this flavor going to be like?
Jennifer notes, one of the initial lightest Oolong cliff teas I've tasted. There's a slight roast after finish at the back of my tongue, long after tea liquor is gone from my mouth. And Jeannie says a sweet lingering aftertaste.
So a sweet lingering aftertaste, that's a great comment, and a slight roast aftertaste. And Jennifer's comment starts off with, this is one of the lesser roasted. You know what? I use the word lesser, not in a pejorative way. Let me use the word least roasted, even though that's not quite what she said, but it's the sense of what she said, that as cliff teas go, this is on the light side of roasting, and yet in the aftertaste, there's that hint of roast, and it's clearly roasted, but there is a gentleness that's been left after this roast. You can tell that the farmers who did this really understood this tea. They didn't over roast it. They wanted to place this on the market for what value it brings all by itself. So they didn't over roast it. They didn't under roast it. They brought out this nice lingering sweetness and the nice lingering roast. All right. Yes. I knew I was going to overtalk because we started a little late. We've had a great series. We love this series. Cuisinart, Golden Diviner, inadvertently, Ecstatic Spring stuck in there, and then this, Theatrical. It's really a wonderful chance to delve into 4 different types of cliff teas. These are all cliff teas, but they all bring you something different, and they all leave you with something different. So that's what we've accomplished over this 3 weeks. I wonder what it is we're going to accomplish over the next 3 weeks. Let me think about that a bit. Maybe we should switch up types. Maybe we should do raw black. Maybe we should start out with reverence. You know what? No matter if the tea is good or bad, the name by itself, oh yeah, I'm cool with that. And we're going to follow that up by Sylvan Symphony. Sylvan Symphony is interesting because it's from the Wuyi Mountains, and it's a caked raw black, and it's more than, I believe it's 7 or 8 years old. And so it's aging within a cake form rather than a loose leaf form. And then we'll end up with one more raw black, which is new something. I forget what it is. But that we have 3 raw blacks over this next 3 weeks. So we'll have a chance to really get in depth. You'll get examples. 2 of the examples will be loose leaf, 1 will be cake. So we'll talk about some of the differences between those modes of preparing the tea. and talk about advantages and disadvantages and why we're doing what we're doing here, because we're doing something a little bit unusual with the raw blacks here. So that's what we're going to get into this next 3 weeks. Also, we're going to start to work on the new packages for the team members. And by the end of this 3 weeks, we will already have those packages prepared for the last half of the year. We'll have the tea tastings prepared for the last half of the year. So we've got a busy 3 weeks coming up. What you have are two things. You have enjoyment coming up, so get ready to have more enjoyment. And then secondly, let's stay healthy these 3 weeks. Thank you very much for great commentary. I salute you for really focusing and being on the money with the commentary. Look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.